When I stepped into the courtroom, my daughter let out a quiet laugh, and my son-in-law only shook his head. The judge's face lost its color, his hand trembling as he whispered, "My God, it really is her." Every face in the room slowly turned toward me. Until that moment, no one truly knew who I actually was. The wooden door felt heavier than I thought it would, or perhaps, at 68, it was really the weight of the betrayal I never imagined I'd face. As I pushed it open, the hinges groaned like some kind of warning, though I couldn't tell who it was meant for. Inside, the air felt thick with tension, filled with the smell of dusty paperwork and stale coffee. I paused, scanning the room before taking another step. There she sat, my daughter, Allison, right across from me at the table. Next to her was Mark, her husband, wearing a gray suit he probably believed made him look impressive, though it only emphasized his mediocrity. Allison was in the dark blue dress I had gifted her last Christmas. The sight of it stung with bitter irony. The moment they noticed me, she released a small laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to rupture the hush in the room. Mark shook his head like someone observing a child misbehaving yet again. The two shared a knowing glance, the kind exchanged by co-conspirators. Maybe they expected I would feel humiliation. Perhaps they assumed I'd shuffle in fragile and bent, fitting their picture of an elderly woman who couldn't care for herself anymore. But that wasn't me. I took another step. My flat shoes clicked sharply against the cold floor, louder than I expected. Then something shifted in the corner of my vision. Judge Patricia Moore, the young presiding judge, lifted her eyes from the file in front of her. But her reaction wasn't the one that mattered. It was the older man beside her, a silver-haired gentleman, dressed in a dark suit, standing tall with a posture that demanded respect. He shouldn't have been present. Retired judges do not appear at small civil hearings. But Richard Coleman clearly wasn't there by accident. The moment our eyes met, the color drained out of his face. The pen in his fingers quivered. His voice came out barely above a breath. Yet the silence amplified every word. "My God, it really is her." Like dominoes falling, heads began turning toward me. Allison and Mark's lawyer, a heavy-set man named Daniel, who happened to be Mark's cousin, stared in confusion. The court clerk's fingers stopped mid-typing. Even the security officer near the door gave me a puzzled glance. I said nothing. I simply moved toward my seat opposite my daughter. Each step weighed heavily on my shoulders, yet beneath it, something else stirred power. A quiet, controlled power. They had no idea. "Mrs. Kimberly Davis," the clerk called out, my name echoing with cold formality throughout the courtroom. Richard still stared at me, disbelief etched into his features. I looked toward Allison. She was biting her nails, an old habit she inherited from me whenever nerves took over. Mark leaned toward her, whispering whatever he hoped would steady her. I almost laughed, but the sound wouldn't come. To understand what brought us here, though, we have to return to when it all began 8 months earlier. The morning my husband Robert took his last breath, and the moment my daughter revealed who she truly was. Robert passed away on a frigid February morning. He collapsed from a heart attack while watering the orchids in our backyard. When I ran out, the watering can was still clutched in his hand. 43 years of marriage, 4 decades of shared breakfasts, pointless late-night arguments about TV channels, and peaceful evenings just sitting near each other. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine. And when I buried him, it felt as though half of my soul went into the ground with him. Allison cried, beautifully, at the funeral, dramatically even. Everyone whispered, "Poor thing, she loved her father so deeply." Mark stood by her, one hand on her shoulder, murmuring things I couldn't hear. Together they looked like the ideal grieving couple. I shed no tears publicly. 70 years of living teaches you that visible tears become ammunition for other people. I saved my grief for the nights when the house fell silent around me. 2 months after the funeral, our home no longer felt like mine. No footsteps. No smell of Robert's morning coffee. Only emptiness. Allison dropped by occasionally, bringing takeout I never asked for, rearranging things that didn't need to be touched. She looked at me with pity. And somehow that was worse than loneliness. "Mom, you can't live in this big house all by yourself," she said, sitting on the sofa I'd chosen 15 years ago. "What if something happens?" "I've lived here 30 years, Allison," I replied. "I think I'll be just fine," she sighed. Mark shook his head in that condescending tone of his. "Mrs. Davis, we just want what's best for you." The way he said it made me want to fling the crystal ashtray at his forehead, but I didn't. They were my daughter and my son-in-law. I still believed in family until the question of inheritance surfaced. Robert had always been meticulous, 38 years as a manager at a food distribution company, retiring with a decent pension and some savings. When he died, he left behind our suburban 3-bedroom home worth around $890,000 and about $340,000 in savings. I was the sole heir. The law was straightforward. The wife inherits the marital estate, and the daughter receives her share only after the wife's passing. But unfortunately for them, I was still very much alive. And that changed everything. Mark began dropping by more often, talking about financial planning, asset transition, and future security. "Have you considered gifting your property before you pass, Mrs. Davis?" he asked, scrolling through his phone while Allison pretended to tidy the display shelves. "Gifting my property? Yes, it would simplify everything later. Fewer legal complications. You'd still live here, of course, but paperwork becomes easier." Such a polished way of saying theft. "I'll think about it," I replied, my stomach tightening. They exchanged a look. Over the next weeks, their visits increased. They always had reasons, bringing food, checking pipes, just seeing how Mom is doing. But I began to notice things. Mark measuring the living room with a tape measure. Allison photographing my father's paintings, whispers stopping the moment I stepped into the room. One night after they left, I found a flyer on the chair, an advertisement for renovation for resale, promising a 60% profit. My blood chilled. They didn't care about me. They cared about the house. And the only obstacle was me. Then their campaign began, quiet yet systematic. Allison called daily, sometimes multiple times. "Mom, did you take your medicine?" I only took blood pressure pills, yet she spoke as if I were incoherent. "Yes, I did." "Are you sure?" "Yesterday you said yes, but the pack was still full when I came." Smooth lies. Just believable enough to make me pause. Mark brought a small notebook. "Write reminders. Monday, electric bill. Wednesday, property tax. I've paid my own bills for 50 years. Of course, he replied with that smirk, but older people forget. It's normal. Another seed planted. Soon came the incidents. One afternoon, Allison burst inside, pale. "Mom!" A neighbor called. They said, "You left the gas on all night. You could have burned the house down." "Which neighbor?" I asked. "Mrs. Claudia." "Claudia died 6 months ago." Allison froze. "I mean her daughter, Megan?" "Megan lived in Seattle. Hasn't visited in years, and no, I had not left the stove on. But they kept planting doubts. And you've been so forgetful lately," she whispered. Mark began telling distant relatives they were keeping an eye on Mrs. Davis because she forgets things. Rumors spread fast. People added their own spice. She doesn't even remember her grandkids' names. I had no grandkids. Allison never wanted children, but somehow I had become the confused grandmother. The final blow came when Mark brought a Dr. Evans. Thin man, wire frame glasses, spotless white coat. A family friend, he claimed. He asked ridiculous questions. "What day is it? Who's the president? What's 7/8?" I answered all of them perfectly. Still, he shook his head. "Mrs. Davis shows mild cognitive decline. Nothing severe yet, but monitoring is necessary. A guardian would be wise." That word again, protect. Allison pretended to be shocked, though relief flickered in her eyes. "Doctor, what should we do?" "Seek legal counsel. Perhaps file for guardianship to prevent financial mismanagement." And that is how my own daughter dragged me into court. Declaration of incapacity. The phrase dropped into the room like an explosion. When they left that day, I sat alone in Robert's armchair, the same one where he watched football and complained about referees. Betrayal seared through me, but I didn't cry. Something old and sharp inside me woke up something silent for too long. I picked up the phone. Mark assumed I barely understood. Opened the voice recorder and began documenting everything, every lie, every manipulation, every scheme. If they thought I was weak, if they believed I was naive and easy to fool, they were about to learn the cost of underestimating a woman who had survived more than they could imagine. And it all began with an envelope. I recognized it instantly. Anyone who has ever spent time working inside the legal system knows that brown paper by touch alone, a summons. My fingers shook as I tore it open, not from fear but from pure rage. The complaint stated, Plaintiff, Allison Carter. Defendant, Kimberly Davis. Subject, Petition for Declaration of Incapacity and Guardianship. I read every line 3 separate times. Each sentence felt like another blade being pushed in. Attached was a 17-page petition, loaded with polished lies dressed in legal language. Their attorney, Daniel Carter Mark's cousin, had certainly done his homework. He described a version of me I didn't even recognize. The defendant often forgets things, displays temporal disorientation, struggles with financial management, exhibits erratic behavior. Erratic behavior. Meanwhile, I woke up every morning at 6, brewed coffee, watered my plant, read the newspaper, paid my bills online without anyone's assistance. They had added 3 medical reports, one signed by Dr. Evans, the man who had inspected me, and 2 more supposedly written by doctors I had never even met, signatures likely bought. There were witness statements, 2 neighbors, claiming they'd seen me wandering around with no purpose. A pharmacy clerk saying I'd purchased the same medication twice in one day. Every bit of it fabricated, every detail planned down to the punctuation. The petition ended with their demands. Strip me of all financial authority, appoint Allison as guardian, transfer complete control of my assets, house, savings, everything. I sat on the sofa, the papers clenched in my hands. The clock showed 3 p.m. The house was silent, but inside me a storm was tearing itself apart. Half an hour later, Allison walked in. She still had her key. The same one I gave her years ago, when I still believed she stood on my side. She entered wearing a face full of practiced concern. "Mom, I need to talk to you." I held up the envelope. "About this?" She swallowed. Of course, Mark appeared right behind her. He always did. "Mom, please, let us explain," she began. "Explain?" I cut in, my voice colder than ice. Allison lowered herself onto the edge of the couch, every gesture rehearsed. "We only want to protect you. This house is too big. You're alone. It's dangerous. The money, someone could take advantage of you." I repeated her words slowly. "Taken advantage of? You mean the way you're taking advantage of me at this very moment?" Her expression tightened. "It's not taking advantage," she insisted. "It's care." "Care," I said, "would be asking me if I needed support, not filing a petition behind my back. You didn't even speak to me before going to a judge." Mark stepped forward with that fake calm tone he always used. "Mrs. Davis, you're misunderstanding the situation. This is only a legal formality. You'll keep living here. We'll just manage the finances and ensure everything stays organized." "In order for whom?" I asked. "For you too?" He folded his arms. "The property is still under your and Robert's names. With guardianship, we can finalize inheritance faster. Sell when necessary. Invest smartly." "Sell?" I echoed. "You intend to sell my home?" Allison reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Not immediately, Mom, but maybe later. A smaller place would be easier for you, and the remaining money would continue to grow for them." Mark exhaled, annoyed. "You're overreacting. Eventually, everything you own will become ours anyway. We're just shortening the process and avoiding complications." Family, that word no longer meant anything. I looked at my daughter, really looked, trying to find even a trace of the child I once carried in my arms, the little girl I had protected and loved and taught to read. But she wasn't there. Not a shred of her remained. "Just sign it, Mom," Allison said, her voice cold as glass. "The lawyer said if you agree. This will be quick and painless." "Painless," I repeated, as if stripping away my freedom were nothing more than a paper cut. "I'm not signing anything." Mark smirked. "Then we'll do it the difficult way. The court will order an evaluation, and the outcome will be the same. You'll only waste money on attorneys." They stood. Allison made one last attempt. "Mom, please think about us. Do it for your own good." Then they left. I locked the door behind them, opened the voice recorder app. Every word was captured, every unfiltered truth. A bitter smile formed. They believed they had built the perfect trap. But they didn't realize the prey had once been a hunter. That night, sleep refused to come. I sat at the desk in my bedroom, the same one Robert had gifted me 20 years ago. The dark wood was dotted with stains of ink and old coffee, reminders of many late nights. I slid open the bottom drawer, the one I always kept locked. Inside were pieces of my past, wrapped in a brown leather folder. My fingers traced over the faint embossing. Kimberly Davis, State Bar of California, 4719th. I hadn't opened that folder in decades. Inside was my attorney license. The photograph showed a young woman, sharp-eyed, neatly groomed. I was 24 then, freshly licensed, third in my class. Below it were newspaper clippings. My mother had lovingly saved. Young attorney wins case against real estate corporation. Kimberly Davis, rising star in criminal law. Female attorney triumphs despite bias. I smiled faintly. That woman seemed gone, but she wasn't. She had simply been buried under gray hair and years of silence. I had been good, very good at what I once did. In the 1980s, being a woman in law was like trying to swim against a hurricane. Male colleagues treated me like a secretary. Judges dismissed my arguments until I raised my voice. Clients only trusted me after their first win. And I did win over and over. That was how I met Richard Coleman. It was 1983. I was 26, he was 29, stubborn but principled, a young prosecutor. The case was a high-stakes tax evasion battle. For 6 months, the courtroom turned into a war zone. I won because Richard made a procedural mistake. I caught it and used it. After the verdict, he shook my hand. "Attorney Davis, it's been an honor, even if I lost." I replied, "The honor is mine, Mr. Coleman." He smiled. "You'll go far. You'll be one of the greats." For a time, he was right. I married at 30. Robert, steady, gentle, was everything the courtroom wasn't. He gave me peace. 3 years later, Allison arrived after a difficult pregnancy that forced me away from work. Robert said, "You've proved enough. Stay home, take care of her. We'll figure the rest out later." I listened. Motherhood swallowed me whole. Time blurred. A short leave became permanent. 2 years later, when I tried to return, my career was already gone. Clients had moved on. My connections were dust. Robert insisted Allison needed me more. And so 15 years slipped through my fingers. By the time she was a teenager, I was in my 40s, my legal career dead and buried. I kept paying my bar dues every year out of habit or guilt. But I never returned to a courtroom. Not until now. I shut the folder, grabbed my phone, and searched for a name. Walter Drummond, Los Angeles attorney. A college friend, one of the few men who respected me. I called. He answered after 3 rings, droned. "Walter, it's Kimberly." Silence. Then a disbelieving laugh. "Good Lord. I thought you'd fallen off the plant. How many years has it been?" "Too many," I said, letting out the first real laugh in days. "Walter, I need help. Go on." I told him everything. He listened, cursing under his breath now and then. When I finished, he whistled. "That's vile. Do you have proof?" "I do. Recordings, documents, everything. I always knew you were my best student," he joked. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. We're going to make them regret this." After I hung up, I looked once more at my old license. That young woman was still alive, awake, and hungry for justice. Allison's 38th birthday was coming. She planned a party at her sleek, icy white apartment. The one Mark claimed was sophisticated. I received her message, "Mom, Saturday night, 8 p.m. Hope you can come." It read like a polite command. I wanted to refuse, but Walter said go. Watch. Record. People like them expose themselves when they think they've already won. So I went. At precisely 8 p.m., I rang the bell. Inside I heard laughter, soft music, glasses clinking. Allison opened the door wearing a tight red dress, perfectly made up, her smile as fake as crystal glass. "Mom, I'm glad you made it." She gave me a quick hug, and the expensive perfume she wore drifted around us, likely paid for with money Mark hadn't earned himself. The living room was packed with people, some distant relatives, a few of their friends, several of Mark's colleagues. No one genuinely cared that I had shown up. "Everyone, my mom's here," Allison called out. A couple of heads turned. Most didn't even bother. I settled into a seat near the window, my purse resting on my lap, my phone inside, already recording every sound. Dinner began. Fancy dishes, imported wine, and hollow conversations about cars, travel, and investments. I barely touched the food. When dessert arrived, Mark stood up, tapping his glass lightly. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" he announced. People raised their glasses. I held mine tighter, an uneasy feeling curling in my stomach. "Tonight is for celebrating my amazing wife's birthday," he said, pulling Allison close. "But there's something else we want to share." My chest tightened. "Recently, Allison's mother has needed a bit of special attention," he continued. "She's been forgetful." He let out a forced laugh. No one joined him. "So we've decided to take control of her house, her finances, everything she owns, just to make sure she lives comfortably without any stress." Heads turned toward me, some with pity, some with judgment. Allison added, with a dramatic little sigh, "It's so hard to see your own mother like this, weak, confused, but we have to be strong and do the right thing." She walked over and placed her hand on my shoulder, pretending it was affectionate, though her nails pressed sharply into my skin. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll handle everything. Your home, your money, your future. You won't have to think about a thing. The air around the table thickened with quiet discomfort. My cousin, Beatrice, the only one with a conscience in that room, looked away. Mark raised his glass once more, dripping with fake sincerity. To health, to family, and to new beginnings. To health, the room echoed unenthusiastically. I didn't take a sip. Instead, I rose slowly and picked up my purse. Mom, where are you going? Allison said, pretending surprise. Home. But the cake. I'm not hungry. I walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me. In fact, I glimpsed relief on their faces. The troublesome old woman was finally leaving. Just as my hand closed around the doorknob, I heard Mark's voice drift from the kitchen, loud enough for me to hear. In 2 months, that house will be ours. That old witch, well, inheritance money doesn't just drop from the sky. His laugh echoed, followed by another man's and then Allison's. At least she's cooperating, Allison said. Otherwise it would be a nightmare. Troublesome, that's what she called me. My hand froze. I inhaled deeply, refusing to turn back. I opened the door and stepped out. In the elevator, alone with the truth, tears came not from sadness, but from fury and determination. I had everything recorded, every lie, every threat, every word. And they had no idea. Monday morning, I sat inside Walter Drummond's office on the 12th floor of a tall glass building in downtown Los Angeles. Skyscrapers filled the view behind him. Walter, now silver-haired, thick glasses, resting low, still had that sharp grin of a man who thrived in courtrooms. Let's hear the recordings, he said, reaching out. I handed him my phone. He plugged it in, put on his headphones, and listened for almost 40 minutes. His expression shifted shock, fury, amusement. When he finally removed the headphones, he leaned back and smiled like a wolf. Kimberly, this is pure gold. This alone could crush their entire case. You've got perjury, forged documents, attempted financial fraud. I could list 5 criminal charges immediately. I exhaled, feeling a weight lift. So you'll take the case? He stared at me as if the question offended him. I'd take it for free, but you'll pay. Because I know your pride won't let you do otherwise. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. How much? $20,000 up front. And if we win and trust me, we will. I take 15% of the settlement. Deal. He scribbled notes rapidly. I'll file to admit the recordings into evidence, request an independent cognitive evaluation, and expose the real motives behind your daughter's actions. I hesitated. One more thing. Go ahead. I want Judge Richard Coleman to know about this. Walter blinked. Coleman? The legend? I haven't heard that name in a while. We worked together back in the 80s. He respected me once. If he knows what's happening, he might show up to ensure the hearing is handled correctly. Walter thought briefly, then nodded. It's not against the rules, and his presence alone will scare the life out of them. Leave it to me. When I walked out, I carried something I hadn't felt in years: hope. But the plan still needed one final piece. That afternoon, I took a cab to a calm suburban neighborhood. Using a faded slip of paper with an address, I rang a doorbell. A gentle-faced, silver-haired woman opened the door. Mrs. Irene? She looked confused. I'm Kimberly Davis. Many years ago, I represented your husband, the workplace injury case from 1987. Her eyes widened. My God, Alfred. Yes. He won the case and was able to retire peacefully. She placed a hand on her heart. Oh dear. Attorney Kimberly, please come in. We sat in her cozy living room while she poured coffee. She talked about Alfred, who had passed 3 years earlier. I explained everything happening to me now. By the end, tears had welled in her eyes. That's horrible. Your own daughter? I nodded. I know it's sudden, but I need witnesses, people who can confirm I'm fully capable. She didn't even pause. I'll testify. You helped my family. Let me help you now. During the week, I sought out 3 more former clients. All agreed to testify. Walter arranged full medical evaluations, neurological, psychiatric, geriatric. Every result came back perfect. Normal cognitive function. No decline whatsoever. On Friday, Walter called me. It's set. Coleman will be there not as judge, but as an observer. Everyone will recognize him. Their lawyer is going to sweat. Kimberly, he added softly, are you sure your daughter will be publicly exposed? I thought of Allison's laughter at the dinner table. Mark calling me troublesome. They're lies. They're scheming. I'm sure. All right. Once you walk into that courtroom, there's no going back. I hung up and stared into the hallway mirror. Wrinkles, silver hair, but the fire in my eyes was the same fire that once controlled a courtroom. The lawyer in me had returned. She was ready. On the morning of the hearing, the sky was gray, as if the world sensed something major was coming. I dressed plainly black slacks, a white blouse, low heels. Simple, unassuming, let them think I'm weak. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. Walter picked me up at 9. On the ride, he went over the plan. Let them speak first. Confidence will make their fall hotter. When it's your turn, be calm. Be precise. Be the blade. Like the old days, I murmured. We reached the courthouse a little before 10 a.m. The hallway buzzed with movement, shuffling papers, old coffee smells, distant voices. It all felt strangely familiar. Allison and Mock were already there. She wore the blue dress I once gave her. He had on that same gray suit he liked to pretend was expensive. Their lawyer, Daniel, was laughing loudly into his phone. But the second they saw me walking beside Walter, their faces dropped. "Mom, who's this?" Allison asked. "My attorney," I answered. Mark frowned. "Why on earth do you need a lawyer?" "This is a family matter." Walter cut in, voice steady. "Attorney Walter Drummond, California Bar, 18,432. And this stopped being a family matter the moment you filed the lawsuit." Daniel walked over with a smirk. "Drummond? From downtown L.A.? For a small case like this?" Walter smiled back, calm and knowing. "I believe this case deserves heavy artillery." Just then, our names were called. We walked into the courtroom, a small, plain room with a rattling air conditioner and a long table in the center. It arrived on a Thursday morning, brown paper. Court seal. My name printed in cold, bold letter. But beside the judge's bench sat an extra chair, and in it was Richard Coleman. His hair was white now, his suit dark, his posture still straight as steel. The moment I walked in, our eyes met. He recognized me immediately, his expression shifting. His hand trembled just a little as he murmured, soft but clear, "My God, it really is her." Every head turned toward me. Allison's eyes narrowed. Mark muttered something under his breath, and Daniel flipped through his file in sudden panic. Judge Patricia Moore, in her early 30s, entered the courtroom. Case number 41,728, petition for declaration of incapacity. Please be seated. We sat. Walter and I, on one side, Allison, Mark, and Daniel on the other. Judge Moore noticed Richard and paused. "Judge Coleman, it's an honor having you here." He nodded, though his eyes stayed locked on me. "Let's begin. Attorney Daniel, proceed." Daniel stood with a confidence he didn't deserve. "Your Honor, this matter is straightforward. The respondent, Kimberly Davis, age 68, widow, is experiencing cognitive decline, forgetfulness, confusion, difficulty handling her affairs. The family simply wants to ensure her well-being until her passing." Walter cut in instantly. "That's a very generous rewrite of their intentions." Daniel flushed. "You're twisting." "No." Walter replied coolly, "I'm clarifying." The judge struck the gavel. "Order. Continue." For 10 long minutes, Daniel presented falsified documents, rehearsed witnesses, and a polished lie of a narrative. Allison produced tears at perfect intervals. Mark pretended to console her, and Daniel sat down smirking. Judge Moore turned to me. "Mrs. Davis, would you like to speak?" I rose. Walter touched my arm gently. I breathed in. When I spoke, it wasn't the voice of a trembling senior. It was the firm tone of a seasoned attorney who had never lost her footing. "Your Honor, my name is Kimberly Davis. I am a licensed attorney, California State Bar, number 34,719. I've been admitted since 1979. I practiced for 15 years in civil and criminal litigation. I have gone up against major corporations and defended hundreds of clients. I stepped back only to care for my family, not because I lost my ability to think or to act." Silence swallowed the room. Allison went pale. Mark stared, stunned. Daniel froze mid-breath. Richard Coleman smiled, a real smile, proud. I slid my chair forward, the same way I did 4 decades ago, before cross-examination. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence the plaintiff chose not to include, proof of the actual motive behind this petition." Walter handed over the documents, verified medical reports, recordings, and statements. "First," I said, "the medical report they submitted was falsified. The doctor who allegedly examined me works at a clinic owned by Mark Carter, the petitioner's husband. A direct conflict of interest." Daniel jumped up. "Baseless accusation." Richard's voice cut through the air, deep and authoritative. "Let her finish, counselor." He had called me counselor. Defeated, Daniel sat. "I underwent independent evaluation by 3 specialists, a neurologist, a psychiatrist, a geriatrician. All confirmed full cognitive ability. The judge scanned the reports, clearly impressed. Next, I continued. The pharmacy employee who supposedly saw me purchase medication twice in one day does not exist, and the neighbor who claimed I left the gas on all night died 6 months ago. Another witness has moved away 3 years prior. Allison trembled. Mark tugged at his collar, sweat forming. Their entire narrative was collapsing. Judge Moore glared at Daniel. This is extremely serious. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And now, I said, the final evidence, the recordings. Walter connected the laptop. The audio filled the room. First recording Allison and Mark in my home, pressuring me. Mark's voice came through. You're overreacting. We're family. Everything you have will be ours anyway. We're just trying to make it easier. Then the second recording, the birthday dinner. Mark again, this time venomous. In 2 months, that house will be ours. That old witch. Inheritance money doesn't fall from the sky. Allison's laughter followed. At least she's cooperating. Otherwise, this would be hell. The room froze. Judge Moore turned white. Even the clerk stopped typing. Richard shook his head in disgust. That old woman, I repeated slowly. My son-in-law's words. And my daughter laughed. I faced Allison. I gave birth to you. I sacrificed my career for you. I sold my mother's jewelry to pay your tuition, and now you call me a burden. She broke into sobs. I turned back to the judge. This case is not about my mental capacity. It's about greed. Judge Moore flipped through everything, her face hardening. Do you have anything further? Yes. 4 sworn statements from former clients confirming my competence, and records proving I manage my finances responsibly. I placed my attorney ID on the table. This license has existed for 46 years. Active, current, never revoked. I never stopped being a lawyer. I simply stopped practicing. I looked at Richard. The woman who once stood against powerful corporations, who battled prosecutors, that woman never vanished, Your Honor. She was only asleep. Richard smiled again. And now I've finished. She's awake. Judge Moore pounded the gavel. We will take a 15-minute recess. When we return, the plaintiff will explain this. She left. Richard followed. Before exiting, he gave me a respectful nod. Only the rest of us remained. Allison staggered toward me, crying, Mom! I raised my hand. Not now. Mark straightened his tie. You'll regret this. We're family. I stared at him, voice cold. Family does not deceive. Family does not lie. Family doesn't call their mother-in-law a burden. His face drained of color. Walter and I stepped out. You were incredible, Walter said. It's not over, I replied. Oh, it's over for them. I smiled wearily. Now comes what they'll hate most. What's that? He asked. Justice. When we returned, everything felt different. Allison's eyes were swollen. Mark fidgeted. Daniel looked like he was silently praying. Judge Moore entered with a neutral expression, Richard taking his seat beside the bench. Resuming the hearing, she said, Counselor Daniel, does the plaintiff wish to make a statement? He stood, sweating. Your Honor, there's been a misunderstanding. My clients acted out of genuine concern. A misunderstanding. Richard said sharply, I heard the recordings. I saw the reports. This isn't confusion. This is criminal behavior. Daniel's throat bobbed. Judge Moore raised her gavel. Let me be perfectly clear. Based on the defense's evidence, this court finds the petition was filed maliciously, with false testimony intended to unlawfully seize property. Therefore, the petition for incapacity and guardianship is dismissed entirely. Allison gasped. Furthermore, she continued, this case is being referred for criminal investigation on charges of perjury, document falsification, and attempted fraud. The file will be forwarded to the district attorney. Mark jumped to his feet, panic written all over him. Your Honor, please. This will destroy us. Sit down. Her tone was pure steel. He collapsed back into his seat immediately. And as for Counselor Daniel Carter, she added, the court formally requests that the State Bar initiate a full ethics review. Building a case on falsified medical documents is a severe violation. Daniel's complexion turned gray. Court adjourned. The final strike of the gavel cracked through the room like a gunshot. Walter squeezed my hand, pride bright in his eyes. Richard walked toward me and extended his hand. Attorney Davis, he said warmly, witnessing your work today was an honor. Your light hasn't dimmed at all. I grasped his hand, my throat tightening. Thank you, Richard, for everything. He smiled and walked away, leaving behind the quiet dignity he was known for. Allison took a hesitant step forward. But Walter moved in front of her. "If you have anything to say," he said firmly, "say it to your lawyer." We walked out of the courthouse into gentle sunlight. The sky was clear, almost as if the world itself acknowledged what had happened. But I knew the battle wasn't fully over, and I was right. Justice arrives. Over the following weeks, justice began to unfold. The district attorney opened a formal investigation. Dr. Evans confessed he had signed the medical report without ever examining me. Mark had slipped him $5,000. The clinic fired him immediately. The fake witnesses were tracked down. One woman admitted Mark had offered her $3,000 to lie because she was unemployed and desperate. Now she faced perjury charges. Daniel's law license was suspended for ethics violation. His firm fired him instantly to minimize the damage. Mark lost his job. His story spread online. Son-in-law attempts to declare mother-in-law incompetent to seize estate. Within 2 days, the advertising agency terminated him to avoid public backlash. As for Allison, her part-time fashion clients all vanished. Who would work with a woman who tried to rob her own mother? But I wasn't finished. I filed a civil suit for emotional damages, $150,000. Walter thought it was a high number, but I told him, it's not about the money, it's about the message. And the court agreed. Both Allison and Mark were ordered to pay the full amount over the coming years. The donation 3 months later, after the first payment hit my account, I drove to a nursing home on the outskirts of Minneq 1 that cared for elderly people abandoned or mistreated by their families. The director, Mrs. Lucy, greeted me with a warm smile. "Are you visiting someone?" "No," I said softly. "I came to donate." I handed her the check. $150,000. Her eyes widened. "This money came from my daughter," I explained. "Compensation for trying to steal from me. I won't keep it. Someone else should benefit from it." Tears streamed down her face as she took my hand. "You don't know how much this will do. We can repair the roof, buy new medicine, improve meals." "Oh, I know," I said gently. "Something good should grow from something cruel." I stepped outside, feeling lighter than I had in years. The call, but one thing still lingered, the question of forgiveness. 3 months after the trial, Allison called. Her name glowed on the screen. I hesitated. The phone rang 8, 10, 12 times. On the 15th ring, I finally picked up. "Hello." Silence. Then a trembling whisper. "Mom, can I see you? You're speaking to me now. Please." I almost refused. It would have been so easy to end the call. Block her number. Erase her from my life. But something deep inside, maybe curiosity, maybe the leftover shadow of a mother's love, made me say Saturday. 3 at my house. "Thank you, Mom." I hung up before she could say more. The visit, she arrived exactly on time, alone, and barely recognizable. Her hair pulled back messily, no makeup, plain clothes, a tired, hollow version of the daughter I once knew. I didn't hug her. I simply opened the door. "Sit." She perched on the edge of the sofa like a reprimanded child. I busied myself making coffee, more to steady my own hands than out of courtesy. Setting the cup down, I said coldly, "Speak." She inhaled shakily. "Mom, I came to apologize." "Apologize?" I echoed. "I know it won't fix anything. I regret everything I did. Trying to have you declared incompetent, calling you a burden, the lies, the damage." She was crying openly now. "Crying is easy," I said. "Tears are cheap." She wiped her face. "I know. Mark convinced me it was the responsible thing to do, that eventually you'd need care, that we were helping. And you believed him." "I wanted to," she whispered. "We were drowning in debt, mortgage behind, credit cards maxed. When Dad died, your house and money looked like a way out." "A way out," I repeated. "By stealing from me." She nodded, sobbing harder, genuinely this time. "And Mark?" I asked. She hesitated. "We're divorced. He filed last month. Said I ruined his life. That he lost everything because of me. As if I was the one who planned it all alone." "You both planned it," I said bluntly. "And now that he's gone, you show up here. What do you want? Money? Shelter? Easy forgiveness?" "No," she cried. "I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know you were right about him and about me." I looked away, out toward the garden Robert once tended. "Do you know what hurt me most?" I asked quietly. "Not the money. Not the house. It was the disrespect. The moment you laughed when he called me a burden. That was when I understood you didn't see me as your mother anymore." I turned back to her. "I was just the woman who raised you until you didn't need me." She broke down completely. A part of me wanted to hold her, but the part of me that survived her betrayal kept me rooted. "Stand up," I said. She obeyed. You want forgiveness? I don't deserve it, she whispered. No, you don't. But I'll give you something better than instant forgiveness. She looked up, confused. A chance. One chance to prove you aren't the same woman who sold her self-respect for convenience. She swallowed hard. Find work. Support yourself. Earn the money you owe. When you make the first payment with your own hands, then come back, then we'll talk. I already found a job, she whispered. Receptionist at a dental clinic. The pay barely covers anything. Good, I said. Means you've started. And yes, it will take years. That's how long rebuilding trust takes. She nodded. And one more thing, I added. Don't come every week. Don't call me crying. Live your life. Understand what your choices cost. So, you'll never forgive me? She asked quietly. I held her gaze for a long moment. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and I won't forget, but maybe one day I'll look at you and it won't hurt anymore. Maybe. She nodded and walked to the door. Before leaving, she whispered, Mom, I really am sorry. So am I. I replied. The door clicked shut. I leaned against it and really cried for the first time in months, not from weakness, from acceptance. Some things, once shattered, never return the same. 2 years have passed since that day in court. 2 years that reshaped everything that. Now I'm sitting in a little cafe in Boston, watching people wander along Newbury Street. The afternoon light stretches across the patio table, blending with the aroma of warm pastries and strong coffee. I visited New York, Seattle, San Francisco, Miami, the places Robert once planned to take me but never did, not because he didn't wish to, but because life swept us forward and I allowed it. Things aren't the same anymore. I sold half my home, turned it into 2 units. I live in one, and a young family rents the other. Their rent gives me the freedom to travel, to finally take the trips I had always dreamed about. A portion goes into repairing the house. The rest I donate to places that need help. One afternoon, Mrs. Lucy from the nursing center called, inviting me to speak to a group of elderly residents who had suffered mistreatment from their families. I refused at first. I'm no speaker, I said. She just smiled. You're a survivor. That's worth more than any qualification. My heart pounded, but I agreed. And when I faced those lined faces, those eyes, reflecting the same hurt I once carried, the words began to flow easily. I told my story truthfully and fully. When I finished, an elderly woman asked, Where did you find the courage to fight back? I paused, then answered, It wasn't courage. It was anger, the anger of realizing my worth wasn't tied to those who betrayed me. The room filled with applause. Some hugged me, some cried. After that, more invitations started coming from elder rights organizations, human rights groups, even a university asking me to speak about legal protection for the elderly. That's when I realized my story wasn't mine alone. It belonged to thousands who had been pushed aside, ignored, or labeled useless simply because they had aged. I became a voice for those who'd been silenced. Allison kept her promise. She worked, struggled, and paid back every dollar. It took nearly 2 years, but she completed it. 6 months ago, she called. Mom, I just made the final payment. Congratulations, I said. Can I visit? I paused for a few seconds before saying yes. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. Thinner, rough hands, but steadier eyes. She'd been promoted to administrative assistant at the clinic. We sat with coffee, speaking not about old wounds but about where we stood now. She told me she was in therapy, learning responsibility and self-forgiveness. I haven't fully forgiven her. Maybe I never will. But the door is open just a little. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a slow, aching climb. I stood up, paid for my coffee, and walked outside. Tomorrow I'll fly to Chicago. Maybe after that Portland or Denver. Wherever my heart leans. My phone vibrated. A message from Walter. Kimberly, a TV network wants to interview you about financial abuse of the elderly. Interested? I smiled. Yes, I replied. After my trip, I slipped the phone into my pocket and kept walking. At 70, I finally understand what I should have known years ago. Kindness is not the same as foolishness. Gentleness isn't weakness. Love doesn't require accepting disrespect. And growing older doesn't make you worthless, it makes you wiser. Allison and Mock once believed I was weak because I chose compassion. They assumed they could crush me because I prioritized being a mother instead of a lawyer. But here's what they never grasped. I never stopped being a lawyer. I simply put the robe away, and when it mattered most, I put it back on. I proved that respect can't be begged for, it has to be claimed. Dignity can't be stolen or bought. And underestimating a woman who has spent a lifetime carrying the weight of other people's scorn is a mistake more expensive than they imagined. They paid that price. And now I am finally living. I paused in front of a small bookstore. In the window a sign read, "It's never too late to start again." I walked inside and bought 3 books, not because I needed them, but because I wanted to, because I could, because I was free, because I learned that the most beautiful revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's being happy in spite of them. Family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes it's found where people truly wish you peace. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It means refusing to let pain define your future. And love, real love, needs boundaries, so that others understand your kindness is not a door they can walk through without respect. I believe everyone has an Allison somewhere in their life, a relationship that teaches you how to trust again, how to release what broke you, and how to rise. What about you? Have you ever learned a lesson like mine? Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe your story will reach someone who desperately needs it. And if you'd like to continue walking with me through stories of family, love, and resilience, stay with this channel. Together, we'll listen, grow, and understand stories that seem to belong to others, but in truth, live very close to our own.